Happy Wednesday, Sullivan family. Spud here with another episode of Navigating the Unknown. Hope you're having a good week. We've been having strange weather up in Pennsylvania where I'm at. So it snowed last week, which is not normal for State College, Pennsylvania, where I'm at. So anyway, we're slowly figuring out how to navigate April itself. It's been a bit of a bizarre month, but hopefully you have a chance here to take a bit of a break with us, get a chance to meet a few of our friends in the social entrepreneurship space. We're going to be talking about what they're up to and how they are navigating things in all of these unknown, uncertain times. So before we kick things off and as we let folks jump on the call here, we always like to start these calls off with a little bit of a tips and tricks of some of our favorite tools that we use in the Sullivan ecosystem. And so today, for those who know Sullivan, you are going to be quite familiar with this one. This is coming from us, from one of our very good friends, Chad Littlefield. Shout out to Chad. Chad runs a company called We, and their whole focus is on helping people build really dynamic connections and break down the barriers of those really shallow connections that oftentimes you bump into with folks. And so they have this amazing toolkit called the Connection Toolkit. In it is a whole host of fun tools that you can use. There are little field guide, pocket guides to help you facilitate activities. There's a couple different card decks in here that you can use, engage cards, connection cards. There's a book about how do you ask really powerful questions. And so part of today, we are going to be talking with two good friends of mine. Let me pull it up here. Romain and Justin. I met them. Both of them were involved in an organization called Watson Institute. We'll probably talk a little bit about that. And they both are doing really interesting work in the space of how do you tell really compelling narratives? How do you think about projects in these really nimble, kind of co-created ways? And so they both have two really interesting organizations, Pathos Labs and Weird. I think I'm saying that right word, Weird. I don't know, we'll find out. I'll talk to Justin a little bit and he'll correct me on how you actually pronounce it. So we're gonna be talking to them today a little bit. And as I was thinking about this conversation that we're gonna be bringing them on here, I was flipping through some of Chad's cards in these connection toolkits. And one of his decks of cards is called this Engage deck. And basically the way you use it, there's a bunch of random images on the back, so you can use these with a group of people. You might lay out the images and have people pick one that really represents what they're thinking about or what they're going through in life, how it kind of correlates to an actual image. On the back side are a bunch of quotes. You can do the same thing, right? So have people check in around a quote that is really resonating with them in some way. And so I was flipping through this deck before jumping on this call, just a few minutes before. And one of the cards really jumped at me. Again, this is backwards, so flip it in your mind. But the quote here says, "Creativity requires the courage to let go of certainties," by Eric Fromm. And that quote really jumped at me, right? Creativity requires the courage to let go of certainties. And the work that both Romain and Justin are up to are definitely in the space of thinking creatively and expansively about what our society looks like in the years to come. They're both tackling it in very different ways, but I think you'll see some of the parallels of what excites them. So we're going to be inviting them on here. We'll chat with them a little bit. As we go, if you have questions, feel free to post them down in the comments section. Give us a thumbs up if you can hear me as well. Sometimes my audio cuts out, and if that's a problem, just, bug me down in the comment section. So if you got questions, hit them up. But the first person that we're going to have join us here is Romain. Romain is with an organization called Pathos Labs, and we're going to invite him on here to share a little bit more of what he's got going on. So let me kick things off. All right.
Hey, what's up, Spud?
Yo, man, I feel like I haven't actually had a chance to talk to you.
I know, man. I know.
This
is great. Let's kill two birds with one stone. First, I just wanted to compliment you on your beautiful button up. That's quite flowery. And also the meticulous Post-its that you've posted in a perfect row. I mean, I'm so impressed. Seems like there's even spacing between each and every Post-it.
Yeah, when people meet me, they sometimes think that I am sort of just a mess and just chaotic destruction follows.
I don't know who would ever think that. You have
there's
everything
definitely
figured out.
organization to it.
I believe it. Good to see you, man.
Yeah, man. So where are you calling in from? Where are you based at right now?
I'm hunkered down in Denver. I
Gotcha.
was out in Los Angeles the last several months and figured it'd be nice to come home before things got too crazy. So I'm glad I flew back to Denver and have been here for the last month now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I am very excited to get to hear a little bit of what you've been up to. I always kind of, every couple months, I feel like there are certain friends in my life where I just go check out what they're doing on social media or their websites, and you are one of them. Just curious of
I'm
the
honored.
media that you're producing and that kind of thing. So, wondering if you could like give us a little glimpse for those on the call, who you are and what are you working on in the world, specifically with Pathos and some of the other projects you got going on.
Yeah, you got it. So I started Pathos Labs, I guess it's almost been 4 years now. And really the question has been, how do we use technology and media to dismantle hatred and prejudice in America? How do we use technology and media and entertainment to inspire positive behaviors in America and beyond? And it's taken many different shapes, to be honest. And so I love the fact that you opened up with that quote, largely because when I was thinking a little bit about what I was going to talk about, it was quite literally that, where 5 years ago, when I had just graduated from college, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea. Like the 5-year plan. Do you ever do those, Spud? Are you a fan of the 5-year plan?
I actually, this is a weird routine that I have, but every November I take a bit of a sabbatical for myself and
Oh, good for
I
you.
do a 10-year plan for
A
myself. And
10-year plan
I map it
every
out
year.
and yeah, every year. And I do like an analysis of like where my hours went, like how much time went to email and all those kind of things. And then I
Wow.
reassess this TV. So yeah, it's a
And
weird
to think
particular,
that people don't think that you're organized. Look at that.
right?
What
See,
a
don't tell them.
testament.
Yeah, it's messing with my brand image. So
That's amazing. Well, no, the reason I bring that up is because I have done a similar, I've had a similar practice the last couple of years, and it's not so much a 10-year plan, but more so a 5-year plan. And I was reflecting upon the 5-year plan that I had written out for myself 5 years ago, and I couldn't be further from where I imagined I'd be. And I think like that's okay. And in fact, creativity encourages that, right? Like I feel like when we engage in this entrepreneurship, this arc, this journey, we have to be okay with the fact that the 5-year plan may be super misguided, based off of preconceptions that are that are informed in what we know now rather than what we'll know in the future. And yeah, I mean, like that's something that I've really found to be true. I mean, you remember last I was working on was I was doing a lot of work with virtual reality.
right.
We were focused on finding ways that VR could be used to create empathy and compassion. And so we started doing that. My first project was a project in what's known to be Africa's largest slum in Kenya, and right outside of Nairobi, a place called Kibera, and was working with a production company to use virtual reality to place people in the shoes of this woman to showcase what life from her vantage point looks like in a way that also dignifies her and her community, because it's I think people in the Western world tend to have this idea of poverty in Africa and look down upon the people, and through their perceptions, they strip people in Africa from their their sense of self-worth, and that was something that I was really focused on working on. So that was 4 years ago, and now what I find myself doing, and I can talk a little bit more about the evolution, is just the last week I finished up a playbook where we were working with some of the leading behavioral scientists around the country to figure out how do we message COVID to increase compliance and to increase the likelihood that people engage in positive behaviors. So we worked with some leading researchers at Stanford and Harvard to put together essentially a list of 30 tips for anyone communicating COVID to most effectively increase compliance. So those two things look so different from one another. Luckily, there's like a loose connecting string that weaves between them, which is the power of media to influence positive behaviors, to create a deeper understanding. And it's been kind of a fascinating journey. There are a bunch of other projects we've been working on, but lately I've been spending a lot of time with behavioral scientists to try to figure out how do some of their insights that have emerged in the academic realm pertain to the world of technology and media and entertainment. And so, yeah, that's what I find myself doing today, which is kind of weird looking at my 5-year plan.
Right, it always shifts.
Oh, it always does.
So fun fact, I don't know if you actually know this, my background, my master's work is in behavior change communications.
No
so how
way.
do you leverage media
Incredible. Look at that.
Anyway, that's 10 years ago, and it's been quite a while, so see if I can, get it out of the dusty nooks and crannies.
Oh yeah, you're sharp as a tack. I'll send it your way, and you'll probably have some great suggestions.
We did a lot with, I don't know, and maybe you've got some tips of what you're learning working with these researchers, but we did a lot of work with like the diffusion of innovation, which for those who aren't familiar is like, right, innovations and messages spread through society, but not in a uniform way, right? So there are always your early adopters that are like the ones hungry to go buy the iPhone right when it comes out. And then you sort of have your early and late majority, like people that slowly get onto the bandwagon. And then you have like your grandparents or like the last ones to like jump on there at the end of the curve. And so we were trying to figure out how do you cater your message in a really different way based on what part of the population you're working with. I forget what we actually decided and learned, but
oh, absolutely. I mean, there are so many little, and this is just something I've learned the last couple of weeks working with these behavioral scientists. I mean, there are so many different tools and techniques that are helpful as far as creating that engagement or creating that buy-in. One book I've just reading, let me get it out because I was reading it this morning. I don't know if you've read this one, Contagious: Why Things Catch On.
Yeah, who wrote that? I've heard that book.
Yeah, that's Jonah Berger, and he's a professor at, I think, Penn. Yeah, Wharton School at UPenn. And he's talking all about virality. You know, why do ideas catch on? How do innovators, take advantage of the viral effect and contagion of concepts as marketing tools, and it's been really fascinating to read that. But yeah, I mean, here's the thing: there's so many things that are happening in the academic realm, right? Like he's an academic, and luckily, like he wrote a book that like may be inviting to people who are interested in the phenomena of virality. But most people will never benefit from these academic insights, right? And where pathos really took a turn was when we were creating VR focused on creating empathy. I started leaning on behavioral scientists to ask the question, what does it take to create empathy and compassion in a lasting way? Like it's cool to have someone feel emotions for a couple of minutes while they're sitting through this experience. But if that doesn't persist through time, then what's the point? And so I started working with a lot of these behavioral scientists, cognitive scientists, social scientists, to really figure out what does it take to change behavior and attitudes over time. And through that collaboration, we were able to uncover some incredible insights and realize that nobody's benefiting from these insights. And what would it look like if we could house and package these insights in a piece of entertaining piece of content? And so yeah, no, it's cool to hear what you were up to as far as the innovator's journey and the diffusion of innovation. I think that's super fascinating.
So I'm curious because I feel like there are always so many unknowns and misperceptions of folks that are leading alternative career paths. You obviously fall into that category. And more broadly, right, within the like social innovation, entrepreneurship space, pick your favorite buzzword. What does work look like for you, right? It sounds like you had to make a fairly, maybe it appears like a big pivot, but maybe from your perspective, it's not that big of a pivot. You're already working with these behavior change folks. So I'm just curious, like, what did a life in the day look like prior to COVID? And then when COVID hit, how did you have to adapt your working model and what your work structure looks like within Pathos to actually adapt to what's going on now?
Yeah, man, totally. COVID really screwed us up. We had been spending the past 8 months putting together an intimate convening of some of the leading behavioral scientists from around the world and television writers in Hollywood. And these were folks that Netflix was nominating, people that NBC Universal was nominating, people that Comedy Central was nominating. And really the point was, how do we use scripted entertainment in ways that subtly but effectively change behavior for the better, challenging hatred and bias and prejudicial thinking, and even like just the unconscious biases, the stuff that's deep down that we don't necessarily realize. And these behavioral scientists had some pretty cool insights. And so we figured, why not bring 25 leading behavioral scientists with 25 leading TV writers in this intimate summit? And so we had been fundraising for that. We had been working on, we had a venue in Los Angeles, and that was supposed to take place next month. And so, 8 months of work kind of down the drain to some extent. And we're still, planning on having the summit maybe later on. But from one day to the next, one day I was figuring out all the details, the logistics, the planning, getting these behavioral scientists, getting their flights to Los Angeles, negotiating with these big media companies like Netflix to see how do we actually get the right screenwriters and showrunners in the room. And then the next day I had like this void where I was like, oh man, what do I do now? Like, I don't want to just stop and watch TV. And so over the course of a couple of weeks, I started engaging with the behavioral scientists to figure out, in this pandemic, how do we respond to it? And worked with talent agencies like CAA and UDA and WME, like big talent agencies in LA, to try to figure out, like, what could their influencers, what could their talent, what kinds of messages could they push out to increase compliance and increase positive behaviors amongst people during this pandemic. And so worked with the behavioral scientists, worked with people in entertainment to develop a playbook. So it was like, we had to be responsive, and it wasn't at all what we had imagined doing before the pandemic, but it was a way that we could leverage what we did have, which was relationships in the entertainment space, relationships in the academic space, to create value. And we have the most comprehensive playbook of communication tactics to really increase compliance, and have worked with the CDC on helping disseminate it. So it's been kind of a fun, unexpected results, but you got to roll with the punches, and it's been fun to do that. So yeah, I mean, and who knows, right? Like, that was something where I was doing. I didn't have a paid client who was paying for that work, but figured, why not try to leverage what I do have to create value, and hopefully that will lead to positive relationships with new companies, new organizations. I've been sending, that playbook out to Fortune 500 companies and their communications team, and so who knows, it may yield some powerful relationships moving forward. So yeah, I think like the nature of creativity, like you said, is to get rid of your expectations, and to some extent be really nimble with your plan of action. And you got to respond to life and adapt. And that's what I've been trying to do as best as I can.
Totally. So I noticed a couple of people joined on here. So if you're just joining in, we've got Romain with Pathos Labs. So if you've got questions for him, feel free to drop them down in the comments or the questions section at the bottom. One, though, that I have, because we were talking at the beginning of this about, right, creating a 5-year strategy and things are changing and just kind of having, though, that long-term, view. And then you're just talking about like more of this emergent, nimble response that you've had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so how are you as a leader and kind of a holder of all of these connections that you have in your world? How are you balancing the need to have to respond in an emergent way versus thinking big picture, strategic? Like, are you weighing those pros and cons of like, well, I could pursue this path because it's opening up for me very quickly, but is that leading in the direction that I want to take this organization and company in the next 5 years? Like, how are you balancing those decisions in the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's honestly what keeps me up at night, is trying to figure out, like what are the opportunities? How do I respond to what's going on, but also not abandon some of the projects that I've been working on that take a little bit more time, that take patience. And striking that balance is really difficult because, of course, like life changes so quickly and new ideas pop up all the time that you may be excited about. But you have to have some sort of discipline to still push along the ideas that take time. And so it's a hard thing to negotiate for sure. What I usually come back to is and thankfully, it's my organization, Pathos Labs, like the mission statement is essentially like the mission statement of my life to some extent, which is, what I'm so curious about more so than anything. And it's the reason why I'm able to do this work and stay up late at night is to think about the power of entertainment and media to positively shape human behavior. And, that's the first vetting strategy. Does a project relate to that? And if the answer is no, then, I write it down, just in a little notebook that I have with ideas, just because I think it's good to keep them listed somewhere. And who knows, maybe I'll go back to them at some later point in time. But, I let them go, and that's okay. And I trust that my mind is creative enough where there will be plenty of ideas, and usually there are. I was just in the shower, and of course, when you're in the shower, hundreds of ideas come to you. So it's a hard thing to. What's that? The best ideas, right?
Well, and you can buy scuba diving whiteboards. This is the thing. I didn't know, but it's like a waterproof pencil.
Oh, I love it. Do you have one of those?
I have one in CoSpace, the house that we run. We've got one in every single bathroom. So.
Cool. Look at you. Look at you.
Yeah. So anyway, there's my tip of the day.
Yeah, man. No, that's send me the link. I would love to, because my shower has a bunch of naked white tiles ready to be defaced with terrible ideas. So
totally. You just need to make sure you get the kind that erases well. Otherwise, they just
yeah,
layer over time, and that's not helpful. So, I'm curious because, and correct me, are there other folks involved with Pathos, or is it just you in terms of the organization itself? How big is your team?
Yeah, it's just me full time, but have some folks helping on a part-time basis. Some interns too, which I'm thankful for, and honestly, just a consortium of academics who are really engaged and wanting to see their work have an impact on society. And so, it's tough because you have to negotiate, spending time fundraising, which, when you're doing this kind of work, whether it's a nonprofit or for profit, like you're the one who's responsible for paying the team. And, that's a big burden to carry. But luckily I have just a good coalition of really engaged folks who have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting on our behalf. So yeah, I feel privileged to have a good community of folks who are engaged and helping out. But still, it's a small, nimble team, and to some extent, I'm happy that it's not a big team because it takes a lot of efforts to do anything when you have to work with a lot of people and a lot of moving parts. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like it's sometimes I feel like I wish we had a little bit more of a budget to hire a couple more individuals to join the team. But
and so that's where I'm curious, is because I think a lot of people right now are just wondering, what's my role in all of this, right? Whether they're involved in an organization or they're just kind of sitting, observing everything that's going around us in society at the moment. And so I'm curious because you've planted yourself in a really interesting bigger picture, right? You're mentioning talent agencies, academics, media companies, Netflix, right? And then it's just you. It's Roman kind of hanging out in the middle. And so I'm curious, like, what are you learning about what you can uniquely bring to the table as sort of an individual who has aligned the mission of your life with the mission of the organization that you've created? Like, what are you seeing that other folks might be able to translate back into their own context, right? So here's a really easy way to get these 3 or 4 disparate groups to work together, and all it takes is one individual to step into the middle of that. So are there things that you're learning, given everything going on with COVID and things are moving so quickly around that?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I constantly am like, my jaws agape half the day because I'm jumping on phone calls with, like I was on a phone call with Adam Grant the other day, who's like one of my leading or my favorite behavioral scientists out there. He wrote Originals, and I'm just like constantly blown away by the conversations I'm having with people who I shouldn't be having conversations with. Like, I'm not a behavioral scientist myself. I just barely graduated college, and I constantly feel like I've got like this I feel like I'm what's the term when you feel like you're not in the right, you feel like you're when like you shouldn't be having that conversation, but you are having
imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes,
I constantly drop it into the comment section. That's why I was stalled. Yeah,
it's completely imposter syndrome for sure. Thank you. Oh, thank you, comment. And that's okay. Like, I realize that my value is relationship building and partnership building. And I jump on a phone call with Adam Grant, or was on a phone call with Rob Willer, a leading social scientist at Stanford, and he's thanking me for my ability to translate some of his very high level esoteric academic language into something that actually applies to society. And in having a communication structure and a dissemination strategy for his research to actually reach people is a huge gift to him. And so yeah, I mean, I constantly feel like an imposter when I'm jumping on these phone calls, but I constantly hang up feeling like I'm doing something that's valuable, and where people are thanking me for that. And that feels kind of weird, but also gratifying in many ways. So I guess like what I have to say is just like focus on, just like recognize what you're good at and own it. And you'll probably feel like an imposter all the time. But own it, and you don't necessarily realize the value that you can provide to people who seem to be way cooler than you are, which is the situation I run into all the time.
Right. I'm reading Originals right now.
Cool.
Started it last night. It's sitting
no way.
bedroom over there.
That is so funny. That is so funny.
So I'll let you know what I think of it as I get into it.
Deal. Please do.
Yeah, no, one of my hopes, I think, out of all of this is that for folks who their skill, the thing that they bring to the room is relationship building and connecting dots and like the people side of things. My hope is that after all of this COVID stuff, we're going to see the importance of that skill way more than we had before, because right, we're doing creative coalition buildings and lots of like ground up movements are happening, right? Rapid response, mutual aid style things. And so for the individuals in the world that connecting, relationship building, like that's the strength that they bring to a group, I'm really hoping that we as a society are able to like give a little gratitude to those folks in the room, because I think that's such a critical skill.
Yeah, man, like thinking about creativity, since that was kind of what was mentioned initially, I think creativity is the connection of two completely unrelated disciplines, right? I think there's so much magic that exists when you connect things that haven't necessarily been connected before. And the people who are good at building out relationships are able to negotiate that that collaboration between these disparate worlds in ways that add a lot of value to both worlds, right? And into society. And so I think those connectors are incredibly important. And even if they may not have the skills of one world or the other, or both in many instances, just the ability to to structure a conversation and structure a model whereby those two worlds are communicating and adding value to one another is huge. And companies pay a lot of money for that too. So
Totally. Well, I know we're coming up on the half hour here, so I want to be mindful of time. But if there is one thing that the Sullivan Foundation Network can do to support the efforts that you've got going on, what would that be? What's one thing that you can kind of leave us with that we can rally around for you?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, I would also like to offer, like if there's anything I can do for the Sullivan Foundation myself, please reach out. And if there's anyone within the Sullivan Foundation who's intrigued by the work that we're doing, we're always excited to bring participants on board. We like asking big questions, and of course, big questions require a lot of time and effort and love from people who like the pursuit of big esoteric questions. So I mean, like the biggest help would be, would love to connect with anyone in the Sullivan community who's interested in asking these kinds of questions that our organization is asking, and would love to have them engaged.
Spoken like a true connector. Way to spin that question up really well done.
Hey, thank you.
Awesome. If folks wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that? Website, social media?
Yeah, sure. My website's pathoslabs.org, and my email is just my first name, ROMAIN @pathoslabs.org. So feel free to reach out there, or Facebook at Romain. My name's so hard. I'm not gonna point them in that direction. Romain @pathoslabs.org is probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking time. Hope Denver's treating you well over the next couple months. And
thanks, man.
Say hi to Adam Grant for me.
Oh, I will. And let me know what you think of his book. And I'm excited to hear what Justin has to say too. He's
totally.
quite a creative mind. And
we'll stay on. If you're going to be around,
friend.
feel free to hang out in the comment section if folks want to chat back and forth. Cool. I'm sure you'll be there to answer questions as we go.
You got it.
Cool.
Awesome.
See you, Roman.
Cheers.
All right. So that was Roman from Pathos Labs. Again, go follow their work. You can see what they've been doing, at least historically up to this point, and then sure to follow along as these behavior change summits maybe happen. Next, we want to bring on another friend here, Justin. And Justin is up to some new projects in the world. So I'm actually quite excited to hear what he's been going on and has in the mix. So let me see if I can rope Justin in to the call here. I feel like Justin I've caught up with a couple times here over the last couple months, and things are quickly moving. So we'll see what the new update is. Hey man, how are you?
What's up, Spud? How's it going?
Good, dude. How are you? I'm trying to remember the last time we actually had a chance to chat face to face.
It was a while ago. I mean, that was like early days of Watson back out here in Boulder.
Right? Yeah. I mean, we tried to meet up in person, a week or two ago, and that
I was so psyched to come out. I mean, I love the stuff that you guys are doing, and I was psyched to try and help capture some of it. So when this all went down, I was definitely bummed, but sending praises that we can make it happen in the future.
Totally. Well, we'll rope you back in the fall. So we'll leave that as a teaser at the end of this call for folks that want to meet Justin in person. Perfect. So you have to do that later. So curious to hear. I'm curious what you're up to, but I know folks on the call and the Sullivan Foundation Network are interested as well. So maybe you can give us a little teaser, who you are, and what are you spending your time on nowadays? Because I'm sure there's lots filling your space.
Totally. Yeah. First of all, just thanks for having me. And I'm psyched to be here and a part of this. And I think it's really cool in response to COVID. You know, it's a bummer that we can't be in person interacting as much, but there's been so much awesome online digital engagement. And it's just so cool to see that humanity and the people are, you know, coming together in these positive ways to talk and share ideas and figure it out. And, you know, while we're physically more distant, I actually think it's bringing people together even more in different ways, which is kind of cool. So
Right.
yeah, just prefacing with that. And yeah, I'd love to give a little bit of background on who I am and kind of what led me to what I'm working on now. So I came out to Colorado originally to go to CU Boulder. I was really interested in film and media, just kind of as a medium. I've always viewed it as this beautiful amplifier, as something that can take a concept or a person or an idea and push it out and kind of, you know, exponentially grow the impact and the message that that's having. So I've always been fascinated with that. So came out to CU, was in the film school originally, and I wasn't super connected to it. It was huge classes, you know, 300-person lectures. And I'm not saying that's bad by any means, but it just wasn't totally resonating with me. You know, I was sitting in a class listening to someone tell me terms about film on a slideshow. And I was like, I feel like I could be out in the world doing this a little bit. And as serendipity would have it, this guy by the name of Eric Glustrom came and talked in one of my business classes. And he gave this passionate speech about how the education system isn't quite equipping next generation leaders, and we need to align the skills that we're giving young people more with the challenges that our world was facing. And my mouth was like open the whole time. I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So I pretty much dropped out of CU on the spot and was like, let's go, Eric. I'm ready to you know, help create and start this university. So that really embarked me. And for those who don't know, Watson Institute, totally should check it out. It's a new university model that works to not only equip students with the skills they need to build a business, but also allows them to get an accredited degree out of that. So you kind of get to do both things, and they connect you with amazing mentors and amazing master course teachers. And it's just a really cool group. And as soon as I got into that group, first of all, Americans were the vast minority. There were 12 of us in the original Watson class, and 2 of us were guys from America, and the rest were women from all over the world. And that opened my mind up to the fact that there's this next generation of young people who see a problem in their community and just have this intrinsic desire and motivation to solve it. And the fact that people are congregating around that and working to do that together, I was like, if there's any hope in solving the complexities that humanity is facing, like, this is it right here. And following that spark and that passion that young people have. So in my mind, my passion for video fit very well into that. And I was like, hey, how can I use my camera to start to share some of these stories, to look at communication, and kind of answering, you know, looking to answer some of the questions that Romain is going after. It's this idea of how can we merge entertainment and social good? And how can we align meaning with people and content who are doing really productive things in the world? So from there, I started a little freelance video production company. Just me and a couple of friends got together, and it happened very organically. We just got a paying client and was able to buy another camera, and just kind of, you know, got referrals after that. So we were able to really hone in this idea of how do we look at a social mission and how do we communicate that in a really effective way to the world. So that was my journey throughout Watson, just kind of playing and exploring with that. And I'm, you know, eternally grateful to have met awesome people like you and Romain, and just this network is super cool. And after I graduated Watson, I started to kind of explore some deeper questions. And these questions came from 2 different groups that I had seen. So I was kind of having one foot in each place, right? I had one foot in the Watson community, which were these passionate founders who had very specific ideas and plans and action to make it happen. And then on the other side, I was in the more traditional university community. And the theme that I saw there was that young people have skills and interests, and they know they want to do something good in the world, and they know that they want to do it with good people around them, but it's really hard to navigate, right? Sometimes universities don't help you find that career. You know, you end up just getting sucked into the service world, or you get sucked into the corporate world, which again isn't a bad thing. You need to make money, you need to support yourself, of course, but I still saw this kind of untapped potential that was rooted in like this raw spark of, hey, I know I have skills and I know I can contribute to the greater scene around me, but I don't quite know how to do that. And I think there's a lot of power in that. So I started looking at how these two groups could come together, because the people, the founders who have these amazing ideas, they need help. It's hard to start a business. You know that, especially one with a social mission. You know, you have to figure it out. And even if you have tools and support, it's like, how do I get the credibility? Like, how do I fundraise and focus on my mission at the same time? And it's a lot. It's a total process. So I was like, I wonder if there's a way where we can marry the potential of passionate young people who have skills and know that they want to help with these amazing founders who have more specific plans. And in my mind, those are two groups that come together really, really well. So I've been exploring that over the past couple of years of how can we create these projects that allow students to develop their own skill set and take another step down their professional career while in the context of solving something greater. And as I started to explore that, another point came into it, was this idea of getting paid. And this is something that, you know, obviously we all need to make money. We all need to eat and support ourselves. But it's fascinating that the social action space doesn't have that as much. If you look at the ways that you can interact with social good, you can vote and you can call your policymakers, you can donate your time, you can donate your money, and you can share that on social media. And I think all those things are great. I really do. We need to continue to put effort into them. But we're facing some really big, complex challenges right now. And my thesis of WEIRD, which I'll get into in a little bit, is that if we want to solve these giant complexities that humanity is facing, we need an organized, structured, managed, and most importantly, paid workforce to help the most impactful projects in the world. So I'm kind of looking at this three-sided marketplace right now. I'm looking at the most impactful social organizations, the most passionate and talented young people, and then funders who can actually pump money into that system. And these funders are people like brands and celebrities and influencers who want to help their audience. You know, I was looking at this kind of idea of influence in these big brands. And if you think about it, all these people and these companies that we buy from, we put them there, right? Us, the audience, the people who supported them and viewed their content and bought their products, we got them to this place. And I think moving into the future, we need to say, hey, it's time for you, after we have invested in you, to invest in us, to invest in our communities, to invest in our skill sets and our passions in making the world a better place. So I'm really curious as to how we can bring these three points together. And that's kind of the thesis of what we're trying to do with WEIRD.
So it's weird, right? Not word.
It's weird. And I'll give you a little bit.
That's what I thought it was. And then it came out of my mouth in the beginning and I was like, hold on, I'm actually not sure anymore.
So that's something that we've definitely noticed a little bit. I've gotten wired a bunch of times too. And it's not just an acronym or an interesting way to spell weird. I'd love to give a quick background into what it actually means. So it's an ancient Norse mythological term. And the legend has it that the three fates, the controllers of human destiny, the past, present, and future, sat under the tree of life and wove together the web of WEIRD, which is all of our individual strands of existence coming together into our collective quilt of destiny. So we're looking to create a modern web of WEIRD where we're able to help individuals on their path come into this greater framework that actually uplifts all parties involved. So that's the background.
I should have known a storyteller would have like a really purposeful meaning behind the name of their logo and everything. So I'm curious because you said you've been working on, at least on the concept for quite a while now. And so with COVID and all of the shifts, like one of the things that I was thinking about as you were sharing is like education now suddenly looks totally different, right? And so is there, this is an assumption, is there going to be a push towards more project-based learning because suddenly people are on their own and you can't just sit and absorb content from someone speaking at you on a screen for every day. So I'm just curious, how is that influencing what you're trying to create with Weird, and what really pivotal shifts societally are happening that are going to influence what you kind of package up into this whole thing?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. And this whole thing has been fascinating to watch roll out, almost unbelievable in some ways. You know, it's like, what is going on in the world? And it's actually been really interesting that some of the things that we were looking at in the building of Weird, before this all happened, I felt like I was hitting walls a little bit, and I felt like I was banging up, like people just aren't getting it, like people aren't seeing the fact that there's all this potential in youth, and that we need to band together and work to create more organized, you know, impactful structures. But then I think COVID and the response to it kind of put some of those out front and center a little bit more. Now, all of a sudden, when you have less internship opportunities, when you've gotten laid off from your job, when your school spring semester is gone, for these massive groups of people, all of a sudden you see, actually, maybe there are other ways that we could educate students. Maybe there are other ways that we could bring together people in order to complete specific social outcomes. So we've actually seen that this is, you know, obviously wouldn't wish this upon anybody, but this has actually helped show some of the issues that we were facing and working with Weird. So we're actually coming out in the next 2 weeks with our first flagship project, which is very exciting. And we've been hard at work behind the scenes. I haven't launched anything or said anything about it yet, because I want to make sure our ducks are really in order, and that once we do launch it, we have the momentum to like really keep going. So we're getting really close to that launch point. But what we've done is we've been reaching out to hubs and impact centers all over the place. I'm sure you've seen there's been a ton of these volunteer connection websites. All the social organizations, a ton of brands, foundations, universities are creating their response to COVID. So what we're saying is, hey, if you can set us up with a project that actually is benefiting vulnerable populations that are affected with COVID, we've got this communication structure and this content strategy that's actually going to be able to pull funding in and organize people who are out of jobs, who are out of internships, who are out of work, to actually get paid to complete some of these outcomes. So that's actually some of the stuff that we're working on. I'm really, really excited about it.
So where are you, because a couple people have been asking me, I've been deep into the grant and loan world in the last couple of weeks, right? Applying for every single thing. I've got a couple different ventures that we're trying to keep afloat. And so I'm curious, where are you seeing funding pockets begin to emerge? Is it coming from the municipalities? Is it coming from the, you know, influential brands, the celebrities? Like, yeah, where are you specifically trying to kind of target your niche when it comes to fundraising and yeah,
totally. That's like the key question, right? That's kind of what everybody's like scrambling for right now. And we were fortunate before this had all happened. We raised a little pre-seed round, and we've been kind of sitting on it, like waiting to find out what to do with it. So we're actually going to self-fund our first couple initial projects. And the concept there with that is that we're trying to build the interest around it. We believe if we can fund 10 to 15 students, produce the content that shows exactly what they're working on and the measurable beneficial outcomes that they're creating, then that's going to create interest. And basically what we're working to do is create this open call that says, hey, we've started this. We've got this bank of amazing talent who wants to participate. And we've got this bank of amazing projects that have really tangible impact. We've funded the first couple, but that's going to be our total next question. And I'm really curious, I think, and this is definitely an assumption, but I do think there's more potential in the influencer thought leader realm, because I've seen a lot of these people kind of on the peripheral of engaging with these, but you know, it's hard on their end too. You want to make sure that the stuff you're supporting is safe. You don't want any bad press associated with it. Like, there are a lot of real questions that create barriers for big brands and influencers to get involved. So what we're really interested in doing is, how can we create something that sits in the middle of that says we're actually really authentically generating this community powered response. So we know that the impact is going to be effective. We know that the people involved are going to be benefited. And we know that the content that's going to be produced is super transparent in all of this. And we're going to see if that can lead to a little bit of pressure on the top, if you will, to say, hey, we're sitting down here being really affected by all these issues. We've got the plan to make it happen. We've got the structures and the tech to back it up. We need your support to actually come in and help do that. So it's a question that we're totally in the middle of answering. And I'd love to keep, the dialogue open after this to see how we can help each other.
Yeah. And one of the things that brought up to mind for me is the piece that has struck me about the last couple of weeks, I think the most, is as everybody has moved to this sort of remote, somewhat work by yourself in your house capacity for those that are able to do that. With it has come this like micromanagement culture that I've seen in different organizations and universities and all kinds of different things, right? So people no longer know what folks are doing, right? Because they can't see you in a meeting, they can't see you in a classroom, they can't see you in whatever capacity they're used to. And so rather than lean into trusting the community and giving them autonomy to create the impact on their own, they're instead, at least some of the examples that I'm a part of, are asking people to track their hours way more rigorously. And like, we need to check in on Zoom calls every 2 hours, right? And it's like this overwhelming, like someone peering over my shoulder. And so the thing that comes to mind that you were saying is like, how do you demonstrate the impact that's happening? How do you communicate that? How do you show it? Because I think that's a really important missing piece, that if we are all going to be living in this reality for a lot longer, we have to lean into autonomy and trusting the people that we work with. We can't just keep micromanaging. And so that storytelling piece, I think, is so critical to be able to show that, whether it's in an education capacity or an organization capacity. So yeah, I'm curious what you end up doing with that part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you're cued into that, because it's something I've been, hard at work in my editing booth, trying to figure out the pieces of how it could come together. And I think what you just said pertains true to the social impact space as well. What's really fascinating to me is that there are so many amazing initiatives coming out. There are so many volunteer connection websites. There are so many text-based websites that says, hey, this is what we're doing. This is the work that we're going to do. If you can volunteer, join in, do it here. And then that's it. And then it's all happening behind closed doors. And it's like, who is actually doing the work? Like, what is actually going on? Like, how do I actually get involved? And the discrepancy there, I think, is that is super different than the ways people are consuming media naturally. If you think about your Instagram feed, your Facebook stories, and your Snapchat, and even TikTok, right? We're super used to seeing this lens into people's lives. We're super used to seeing these human interest stories of what people are doing. And often it's silly, right? It's like the funny things that are happening in people's journeys. But it's that concept of, we're really used to seeing how things are done, how people are interacting in their world. And the social impact space isn't doing that. So when you interact with this weird platform that's coming out in a couple weeks, it's not going to be text-based. It's not going to be just, this 1 3-minute video that says, here's our problem and here's our solution. We're actually curating a real-time feed of all the different people who are working on these different projects, updated multiple times a day. So you're going to be able to easily scroll through 10 to 15 second videos and be able to navigate around the different aspects. And actually, that's going to be your access point in. So I'm really excited to explore that connection, because I think there's a lot of potential there.
So are you guys you're building out a platform for that? Is it having video, text? I mean, what ways are you trying to, one of the phrases a friend of mine uses a lot is like, capture the caterpillar. So, right, a caterpillar had a long journey to get to that point, and sometimes we forget those little milestones. So how are you thinking about capturing those milestones along the way?
Totally. So we're definitely in the minimum viable product, rapid prototyping phase, right? We want to figure this out with as low barrier to entry on the front end. So right now what we're looking to do is I do think eventually you could build a really beautiful platform that hosts all this, but there's so many amazing tools out there right now. We're working to curate as many of them as possible. So with a super simple timeline, and with a super simple series of tags that allow you to navigate between advisors, between project applicants, between project promoters, you're going to be able to flip through just, through embedded video, these little 10 to 15 second story. And the idea is that we want to make the viewers feel like they can belong in this community. We want them to feel an emotional connection to other people who are just like them, who are feeling a little bit down and out, who maybe have lost an opportunity, who maybe feel like, you know, this is a big complex problem. I don't really know how to get into that. We want to make you feel that this is a group of people who don't have all the answers figured out, but have a really structured timeline and series of steps to get to the end of the project, and then make that an avenue for people to apply in and actually be a part of that community. So we're going to be exploring those and like how it actually manifests. I'm actually hopping off to get on a call with my designer to tighten up some of the tweaks after this. So stay tuned, but I'm fascinated as to how we can change the messaging and the brand of social action from these kind of big projects that are happening behind the scenes to this group of really badass people all over the world who have seen problems and want to, you know, benefit their own lives through helping others.
Totally. I mean, I've been weirdly inspired by like late shows like Jimmy Fallon and stuff, right?
Totally.
Where I didn't used to follow Jimmy Fallon as much as I do now that he's filming a way more real show from his house, and it's dirty and raw and it's a rapid prototype. And there's something that like I'm way more attracted to that production, right? The content that is coming out in that way. And so that's been really interesting for me, is like, how much is that going to continue in a post-COVID society, if that is even a thing, right? But like, how much is this sort of like raw, like a, you know, just look behind the scenes and like produce things as we go mentality versus having this really polished thing? And yeah, if the social impact world can like break that facade, I think it would be wonders. Yeah.
Totally. It's, you know, it's fascinating. If you look at kind of the trend of media, specifically in the last, you know, 20 to 50 years, it's always these super polished models with makeup and really nice lighting and like all this, you know, fancy accolades, which creates a barrier and a separation, right? And it's like, oh, that person's not me. Like, I'm just going to sit here and be the viewer and watch. But the really cool thing about all this digital communication, especially in response to COVID, is one, we're all in the same place. So we're all at home, you know, we all have kind of the same resources. Two, it's like, why does it have to be this untouchable group of people who are getting shared and promoted through digital media? Like, I think you can build that sense of belonging and ultimately that feeling of empathy by showing that we're all humans, we're all imperfect, we're all trying to figure this out, you know? So I totally agree with what you're saying, for sure.
I mean, if anything, my conversation with you and Roman today has reminded me my very first social venture that I started 10 years ago was a talent agency that was trying to like bring all of these elements in. And boy, it was the biggest spectacular mess that I've ever got into. It failed in more spectacular ways than I could even imagine. It's totally got movie quality on it. Maybe I'll have to tell Roman to like pass the script on to some of his Netflix producers. But anyway, I feel like this is such a critical thing to figure out, is the role that media plays in all of this. And so, yeah, I've been loving this conversation.
Totally. Me too. And I think there's definite alignment. And that must have been, you know, 10 years ago, social impact and the idea of social entrepreneurship was even like less mainstream than it is now. So that must have been an uphill battle for sure.
That's probably why it failed. We'll just check.
Right. It wasn't you, it was the world.
Yeah, it wasn't that we got catfished or any other random things, but yeah.
You're
a story for another time when we have more time on Instagram. But in the interest of time, before we get cut off on Instagram, is there one thing that folks can do to support your efforts, follow along? When can they expect to hear something? And if so, how do they hear about it? Yeah, where can we point people?
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, I'm really curious about engaging deeper with the Sullivan Foundation Network, because I think you guys hold a lot of these really incredible people who, one, both have projects, and two, just want to participate in some way. So the way I'm thinking of it is there's power in numbers. And if we can build this movement of people who really say, we want the keys to our own lives, we want the keys to our own communities, and then we're able to show that we have a plan to do that in a really effective way, I think that's going to be a powerful step and a powerful movement. So if anything that you heard resonates with you today, I'd love for you to reach out. You know, we're really looking to curate these paid opportunities. We've got some money in the bank and we're ready to get this rolling in the next couple weeks. So on two sides, if you've got a project that needs assistance and that could benefit from a team of paid people that's curated and managed around you, or if you have a skill and you're trying to figure out how to fit into this whole thing, please reach out. You can go to theweirdgroup.com. It's WYRD, and my email is j@theweirdgroup.com. It's just a little landing page right now, but you can expect in the first week of May that we'll be launching the full platform with the first project. So stay tuned.
I will mark it on my calendar to go check. So
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking time. We will definitely do whatever we can to amplify things throughout Sullivan's community, but appreciate the efforts you got going on out there, and hopefully they start slowly building momentum. So
hey, that's the plan. We're all in this together, and thank you for including me in this. I really love this conversation, and it was awesome to hear from Romain. So keep putting these webinars out. I've watched them all. They're definitely powerful, and you're doing it, man.
it's getting there. I'm getting very used to this spot in my my little bouncy chair.
It looks good. You've got the background all figured out.
Exactly. So cool, man. Well, good catching up with you, and yeah, we'll be in touch later at some point.
Sweet, brother. We'll talk soon. Have a good one.
See you, man.
Later.
Awesome. So that was Romain and Justin. If you missed any of the conversation, we will be posting all of it onto our Sullivan website. So we post all of these on YouTube. You can go check them out at sullivanfdn.org/webinar. And you can go just binge watch, right? Who needs Netflix? You can just binge watch Spud talking to other people online. So what could be better?